Good day to one and all. Welcome to another session of dentistry and more. Now we'll be continuing with the question paper discussion in oral medicine and radiology. So the topics that will be discussed under this time is the salivary gland disorders, cysts of the orofacial region, and the oral cancer. So the first question that can be asked under this topic is describe in detail about xylography and its significance in various diseases of the salivary glands. You can refer from the textbook Oral Maxillofacial Radiology by Freni Karjotkar. Under the diseases of salivary gland itself, under that chapter, they have given beautifully described about what is xylography as such. So, xylography is the retrograde injection of contrast agent, usually the iodine based, into the ductal system of a salivary gland. For the phases of xylography, you can go through this textbook by Freni Karjotkar itself. In that, it's mentioned about ductal phase, acina phase, and the vacuation phase. What are each phases, and how do you go about through the procedure? All that has been explained well in this textbook. And then you have to speak about the indications as well as the contraindications in xylography. So the indications as highlighted, it's to assess the ductal architecture of the salivary glands, and if there is to assess any developmental disturbances, and also to detection of any calculus or the salivary calculus or the xyloliths or foreign bodies that are placed within the major salivary glands, such as the parotid as well as the submandibular gland. And then the evaluation of the extent of the irreversible ductal damage as present due to the result of chronic infection. Then also to differentiate diseases such as chronic xylidinitis, Sjogren's syndrome, and xylosis. Then to evaluate the fistulas, strictures, diverticula, communicating cysts, and ductal trauma. And also, while in the dilating procedure, you can also detect mild ductal stenosis, and also to evaluate any masses within the salivary gland, such as the submandibular as well as the parotid glands, in conjunction with the CT scan. So the contraindications are acute salivary gland infections can't be detected, then the malignant lesions, and also when patients are allergic to any contrast agents such as the iodine based contrast agents, and also when the patients who have undergone thyroid function test during the period of xylography, and also it is contraindicated in pregnant patients. You can refer the textbook in relation to the significance of the salivary glands related to the xylography. So the classic pathological appearance that you xylidinitis, it is the apple tree in blossom appearance, and in xylolithiasis there's a ductal dilatation proximal to the calculus, and in xylidinosis it's a leafless tree appearance, and then in Sjogren's syndrome it is the cherry blossom appearance that you see. So you can see here in the picture that is depicted here, it's a cherry blossom appearance or the fruit laden appearance. The short notes that can be asked under this topic is xylolithiasis are those calcified organic matter forms within the secretory system of the major salivary glands, and these are found to be asymptomatic, and the etiology is unknown. And then the predisposing factors that can lead to this condition is the inflammation, irregularities in the ductal system, local irritants, as well as any usage of anticholinergic medications. So the clinical manifestations that are seen in xylolithiasis is that the patient gives a history of an acute painful as well as an intermittent swelling, the stasis of saliva leading to the infection, fibrosis, gland atrophy. Then the fistula, sinus tract as well as ulcerations can be seen in chronic cases. So the treatment protocol that we follow for treating xylolithiasis, in the acute phase you give a supportive treatment, and then the standard care is found to be we prescribe analgesics, hydrations as well as antibiotics and antipyretics. And then in severe cases we have to drain or remove this calculi. Next question to be asked is a necrotizing xylem metaplasia. So necrotizing xylem metaplasia, it's nothing other than benign locally aggressive inflammatory lesion of the salivary gland tissue. It can mimic the malignancy or malignant ulcers itself, and it's found to be occurring in the 4th and the 5th decade, and most commonly it affects the posterior hard palatal region and is found to be a unilateral presentation, and the early lesions are found to be non-ulcerated with or without pain, whereas within 2 to 3 weeks it forms the necrotic tissue sloughs, and then it leaves like a crater like ulcer which is found to be more than 5 centimeters in size. And the treatment is there's no specific treatment indicated, and lesion heals by secondary intention with no intervention within 4 to 10 weeks. Next question to be asked is a ranula. Ranula is nothing other than larger mucocele that has been located on the floor of the mouth. So this, when it is located on the floor of the mouth, it causes the raising of the tongue. And the cause is due to the obstruction of the salivary gland or the ductal aneurysm or trauma. And it is found to occur commonly among the females in the second decade. And it's almost representing that of the frog's belly. Clinically, it's presented painless, slow-growing, soft, movable mass, which has a bluish hue. When it is deep-seated, it is found to be the mucosa appears to be normal in color. And the plunging ranula, these are the deep lesions that can herniate through the mylohyoid muscle and it can extend to the facial plane. And the treatment is nothing other than the marsupialization of the lesion is done. Next question that can be asked is a sialosis. Sialosis is nothing other than a non-inflammatory, non-neoplastic that occurs recurrent in condition, and also is commonly affecting the bilateral enlargement of the parotid as well as the submandibular gland. And it's found to be unilateral or bilateral, and it sometimes there's pain or it can be painless lesions, and this is slow growing swelling that can be seen bilaterally or unilaterally, and is also found to be associated with any underlying systemic conditions such as that of diabetes, hypothyroidism. Also it's associated with alcoholism too, and the treatment, it depends on the underlying cause. So based on that, we undergo the treatment for such cases. Moving on to the next topic, there's a cyst of the orofacial region, and the short notes that can be asked under this is the radicular cyst. Radicular cyst is nothing other than a true cyst that is associated with any roots of the non-vital tooth, and it's commonly affecting the anterior maxillary anterior region and then followed by other posterior mandibular region. In this, it is found to be an inflammatory response that occurs in the periapical region, which is caused due to the remnants of any dental lamina as well as a cell death of malacis. Then it causes a resorption of the bone and leads to the formation of granulation tissue. And most of the cases is found to be asymptomatic. And when radiographically, when seen, it is found to be a well-defined unilocular radiolucency, which is found to be occurring in the periapical region of the non-vital tooth. And also you can observe that there is a well-defined sclerotic border, which is found to be more than 1.5 centimeter in size. And when the treatment that is undergone for the radicular cyst is nothing other than endodontic treatment, or as well as if it is prognosis is a poor tooth, then you have to go for extraction itself. And sometimes you can undergo episectomy as well as extravasation and curettage of the cyst. The next question to be asked is pericoronal radiolucencies. When go through this textbook by Diagnostic Imaging of the Jaws by Langland and Langley, in which they have already one separate chapter that is under this heading itself, that is pericoronal radiolucencies itself. In that, you have other lesions such as that of the conditions that come under this is pericoronal abscess. Then you have the follicular cyst, then you have dendrigerous cyst, then AOT, calcified epithelial odontogenic tumor, and also the ameloblastoma. So in each of these lesions, you should describe about where do you see this, how is the periphery, and how is the extent of this lesion, as well as the internal structure in each of these conditions. So you can describe each of these lesions such as that of the pericoronal abscess, the follicular cyst, dendrigerous cyst, AOT, and then calcified epithelial odontogenic tumor, as well as the ameloblastoma. Next question is about odontogenic keratocyst. Once you start with the odontogenic keratocyst, it's nothing other than a developmental cyst itself, which is arising from the remnants of the dental lamina itself. And then you can describe about the clinical manifestations, that is age predilection is found to be around the second to the third decade, and also it can come into the later stages from the fifth to the later decades itself, and it is found to be occurring in males. And then the site of predilection is found to be around the mandible, especially around the ramus third molar region, followed by the first or the second molar, and then the anterior maxilla. And most of the cases it can be represented not only just one lesion, it can be represented two or more lesions itself. And also this can be asked in the even during viva sessions itself, what are the syndromes that are associated with multiple odontogenic keratocyst. So these are the syndromes that are enlisted that you can highlight upon, and even when you're answering the question, you can mention about the syndromes that are associated with the multiple odontogenic keratocyst. And it's nothing other than the nevoid basal cell carcinoma syndrome. Then you have the Golling-Goltz syndrome, Marfan syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Then you have Noonan syndrome, orofacial digital syndrome, Simpson-Labbe Behmel syndrome. These are the syndromes that can be associated with multiple odontogenic keratosis. Then you have to highlight about the radiological features. It can be presented as a unilocular, also multilocular radiolucencies, in which you can see that it can also cause displacement of the tooth of interest, and also it can cause even the root resorption to the adjacent tooth. And the treatment for odontogenic keratosis is nothing other than curettage itself, or even enucleation is done. Next chapter is about oral cancer. In oral cancer, the first question that can be asked is define white lesion and also classify oral white lesions and describe the etiology, clinical features, diagnosis and management of oral cancer. I believe this has been discussed again in the red and white lesions chapter itself. So I'll just brush through what it is. Definition of white lesion: it is nothing other than lesion that appears to be having white patches in the oral cavity, and the classification is based on the etiology itself. That is, in hereditary you have leukoedema, white spongy nevus, hereditary benign intraepithelial dyskeratosis. Then in reactive you have the frictional hyperkeratosis or frictional keratosis. Then you have nicotine stomatitis, hairy leukoplakia. In the pre-neoplastic you have actinic cheilitis and the leukoplakia. And non-epithelial white yellowish lesions or the pseudomembranes or the infectious lesions that you can see is in the candidiasis. And also in the pre-malignant condition you have the oral submucous fibrosis, and the others are nothing other than geographic tongue. In oral cancer, once asked, you have to go through the same headings, that is etiology, clinical features as well as investigations, and then followed by the treatment. In oral cancer, the etiology can be, it might be genetic susceptibility, immune status, it's based on the immune status, environmental factors, and also the usage of any adverse habits such as that of tobacco usage, alcohol, and systemic conditions such as that of patients who are undergoing ionizing radiation or radiotherapy, as well as in viruses. It has also been seen, most commonly the HPV viruses. And then you have the nutrition as well. Dental factors, it means that if there is any trauma due to any chronic irritation towards the fractured tooth or any sharp cusps can lead to this kind of condition. So the clinical manifestations that is seen in oral cancer, the early signs are the persistent red or white patches, non-healing ulcers, progressive swelling, unusual surface changes, sudden tooth mobility without any cause, and even unusual oral bleeding, prolonged hoarseness of the voice. Then the later signs are found to be an indurated ulcers or paresthesia seen, diaesthesia seen, airway obstruction, chronic earache, trismus as well as dysphagia, and along with that there is a associated cervical lymphadenopathy. So the diagnosis is based on the vital staining that is done, and also brush biopsy, exfoliative cytology, tissue biopsy, imaging such as that of the computer tomography and the magnetic resonance imaging, ultrasonography, and there are newer diagnostic tools such as that of Wellscope, Vizilite and all, with which we can detect the dysplastic cells. The treatment protocol that has been followed for this case is surgery, radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Surgically you go through a neck dissection or the commando surgery, and then you have the radiotherapy, that is the brachytherapy, external beam radiotherapy, newer modalities such as IMRT and IGRT, and then you have the radiotherapy which is combined along with the chemotherapy, and the chemotherapeutic drugs such as that of methotrexate, bleomycin, cisplatin as well as fluorouracil. So to read about brachytherapy, external beam radiotherapy and the newer modalities, you can go through the textbook of Burkitt's Oral Medicine itself, and under the chapter of oral cancer they have spoken about it, so you can go through it. Essays that can be asked are TNM staging of oral cancer. This is being given in Burkitt's Oral Medicine itself. You have to speak about each of the grading. For T, that stands for primary tumor, N that stands for regional lymph nodes, and M stands for distant metastasis, and then followed by the stage grouping. So you have to read about this and study by heart how to go about the TNM staging of oral cancer. Next question is about the osteoradionecrosis of the mandible. This is also being given in radiology textbook also, that is by White and Farrow in radiation biology chapter. When you can go through, even it's been you can refer in the textbook of oral and maxillofacial pathology by Neville itself. They have beautifully described what is osteoradionecrosis. It is nothing other than the radiation therapy, post radiation therapy, which can cause endarteritis obliterans, which can result in the 3 H's, that is hypovascularity, hypocellularity, as well as the hypoxia. So the predisposing factors are the trauma, periodontal diseases, ill-fitting dentures, the pulpily affected teeth in line of radiation. And the clinical manifestation that can be seen is the patient will be presenting pain, foul taste or malodor, paresthesia, as well as any extraoral and intraoral discharging sinuses, and is also associated with the cervical lymphadenopathy and also pathological fractures. So how to prevent is that you have to plan the extractions, that is prior to the radiotherapy, and allow much healing time phase, and then avoid any mucosal irritants, and also discontinue with the dental appliances and maintain nutrition, and stop all your habits such as that of the smoking as well as alcohol consumption. Then you have the treatment for osteoradionecrosis is nothing other than the antibiotic coverage itself using tetracycline, as well as antiseptics such as that of the chlorhexidine mouthwashes have been used. And then you have the hyperbaric oxygen therapy and the sequestration of the bone, which is managed by the limited resection or the mandibulectomy. Next question that can be asked is the differential diagnosis of cervicofacial lymphadenopathy. So once this question has been asked, we have to speak about what is lymphadenopathy. It is nothing other than a term that is used to describe the clinical sign of swelling of the lymph nodes, whereas lymphadenitis, which means is a pathological term for the inflammation of the lymph nodes. And once the differential diagnosis has been asked, we can speak about the causes itself, that is the etiological factors of the infections and neoplasms as well as the miscellaneous ones. So the infections under that you can give about a highlight about the bacterial, viral as well as parasitic and the infective ones, such as that of under bacterial you have the tonsillitis, then you have tuberculosis, syphilis, cat scratch disease, then the Lyme disease. Then under the viral you have about herpetic stomatitis and the infectious mononucleosis. Under the possibly infective ones are the Kawasaki disease. And then the next cause is about neoplasms, such as that of primary and the secondary. In the primary you have the Hodgkin's lymphoma, the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and leukemia. And then in the secondary you have the carcinoma, such as that of salivary gland as well as oral and nasopharyngeal carcinomas. Malignant melanomas are also can be indicated. And then you have the miscellaneous, you have the sarcoidosis, then the drug reactions as well as the autoimmune diseases. Next question to be asked is the differential diagnosis of chronic ulcers on the lateral borders of the tongue. So these are the enlisted ones, that is recurrent after stomatitis, drug-induced mucocutaneous syndrome, autoimmune disorders, hematological disorders. So once you're describing about these conditions, you have to highlight about what are their features and how do you differentiate from one another. So you should speak and highlight about each one of them. Once this question has been asked, you can speak about what is exfoliative cytology. It is nothing other than a microscopic study of cells that are shed or obtained from the body or the mucosa, especially for diagnostic purposes, as in to determine whether there is any cancer or not. So these are the dysplastic cancerous cells which have a fewer and weaker connections in which they tend to slough off or exfoliate, that can be easily being collected from the surface of the lesion. So these samples are then applied to the microscopic slides, and then we are detecting whether there is any dysplastic or the cancerous cells is present or not. So you can give the indications as such. You can go about and read in the textbook of oral medicine itself in Anil Gomes. They have explained about what is exfoliative cytology in that. So have a read about it. How to go about the methods of the exfoliative cytology, wherein you can use a brush biopsy or the cotton swabs have been placed over to that region of interest, and then you place it over to the slide, and then you can use a pap smear to find out whether there is any dysplastic cells or not. Thank you for your patient listening.